Hey everyone, my name is Emma, and I am working with Betty and Amanda on this project. We're group number 3. We chose to do the story of Daryl Davis and Roger Kelly. This is about how two people who seem worlds apart actually find a way to connect. The title is How Can You Hate Me When You Don't Even Know Me? And it really just gets into how talking and listening can break down walls between people. A little background on the two main people here. Daryl Davis is a black blues musician and also an author. He grew up dealing with racism, but he chose a different way to respond to it by reaching out to members of extremist hate groups to try and understand where they're coming from and why they feel the way that they do. We also have Roger Kelly, and he was a big leader of the KKK. He was also known as the Imperial Wizard of Maryland, and as you can imagine, they had very, very different beliefs, but Davis wanted to learn from him rather than argue with him. And that is how their story started. I made a little timeline here just to kind of give you guys an idea of their relationship. In the early 1990s, Davis reached out to Kelly to do an interview for a book that he was working on. Their first meeting happened in a hotel room, and it was a very intense meeting because Kelly brought a bodyguard with him. Davis kept going back. He kept attending Klan rallies. He also continued having conversations with Kelly over the years. Eventually, Kelly actually left the KKK, and because of Davis's conversations, he had a very, very large impact on dozens of other members leaving as well. A really important communication idea that Davis used was empathetic listening. That just means listening to understand someone and not to just argue back. Davis asked honest questions. He gave Kelly room to share. He also stayed respectful even when he disagreed. This kind of patient and respectful listening helped Davis build trust with Kelly, and it opened the door for a real change. So, how they met and first impressions. When Davis first asked for the interview, Kelly thought he was a white man. So, when Davis showed up and he was a black man, Kelly was very surprised, and that meeting was pretty tense, or that initial first meeting was. Kelly was very reserved, he was very guarded and cautious, and that's why Kelly brought the bodyguard with him. Davis stayed calm and curious, and that helped lower the defenses in the room. And instead of immediately attacking Kelly's views, Davis asked questions and he listened. He gave Kelly room to talk, and that just changed the entire tone of their interaction. Second part of this slide shows the transactional communication model, and that's that diagram here on the left. Basically, both of them were senders and receivers in their conversations, and that just means they both talked and they listened actively. There was a lot of noise in their communication, but not just sounds. This included cultural bias, racism, distrust, and the history between their groups. They mostly talked face to face, but they also used phone calls and letters. And over time, Kelly started opening up more, and he even invited Davis to some of the rallies. And because they were so careful with how they said things and how they understood each other, tone and body language, they were able to keep the dialogue going in a really tense and probably uncomfortable. Sorry, guys, my computer glitches at this slide. I don't know why. Anyways, because they were careful with how they said things and how they understood each other's tone and body language, they were able to keep the dialogue going in what I assume was a really tense environment. Perspective taking in action. Daryl Davis showed 3 important types of perspective taking in their talks. The first one is cognitive empathy. That's where he tried to understand Kelly's point of view, even if he didn't agree with it. There was also the focus and the curiosity. Davis listened to understand and not to argue. He was genuinely interested in what Kelly thought and why. Finally, empathy, and Davis stayed calm even when Kelly said hurtful things, and he treated Kelly as a human being, not just a stereotype or a label. Davis once said, "You challenge them, but you do not challenge them rudely," and that just really sums up his entire approach in this case. Um, so, yeah, there were definitely some big obstacles between them. There was the racist beliefs and a long history of trauma, mistrust, and pressure from the communities. But they both still managed to connect through calm, respectful communication. They found shared humanity through things like music and culture. And Davis showed a lot of patience and emotional intelligence because he didn't push, he just stayed open. And that's how they built an unlikely friendship.
Hello, this is Amanda Freeman, and this is for a group project, our presentation for group 3. And this is my portion of it. So for slide 1, it's sources of conflict. So when you look at Daryl Davis and Roger Kelly, the conflict was built in from the start. Using Moore's circle of conflict, a few things jump out. First is the values conflict. Daryl believed in equality and breaking down racism, while Roger was leading the Ku Klux Klan, an organization based on white supremacy. That's about as far as two people can get in beliefs. Then there's relationship conflict. Their worlds didn't overlap in a good way or a friendly way. There was a long history of mistrust, hostility, and violence between their communities. The data conflict is the last one I was focused on in this slide. They weren't just working with different opinions, they were working with completely different facts. Most of Rogers being shaped by bias and misinformation. They were starting from opposite ends of the spectrum completely, and those differences were tied to identity, not just ideas. Hello, this is Amanda Freeman, and this differing values and beliefs. Their values couldn't have been more opposite at the beginning. Roger valued maintaining the traditions and ideology of the clan. Daryl valued equality, unity, and understanding between races. Roger's worldview was about separation and hierarchy. Daryl's was about connection and breaking barriers. Even their ideas about safety were different. Differing values and beliefs. Their values couldn't have been more opposite at the beginning. Roger valued maintaining the traditions and ideology of the clan. Daryl valued equality, unity, and understanding between races. Roger's worldview was about separation and hierarchy. Daryl's was about connection and breaking barriers. Even their ideas about safety were different. For Roger, safety meant keeping groups apart. For Daryl, safety meant removing the reasons for hate and fear in the first place. It wasn't just a disagreement on politics or policy. It was two different moral compasses pointing in opposite directions. And this is something that was really hard for me to look at. Honestly, the photo in this slide, two photos, but one of Daryl Davis's quotes was, "No one is born racist. Racism is taught and it can be untaught," by Daryl Davis. And it shows photos of little kids being like sworn into or whatever they do. I don't know how they do that. Just being basically brought into it. And it's terrifying. It's sick. And that's how you know that it's taught and it's not something someone's born with. Managing differences constructively. The way they managed these differences was surprising. Instead of shutting the door, Daryl kept it open. He listened without instantly attacking, and that gave Roger space to speak without feeling cornered. Daryl focused on finding shared ground, like music or being veterans, and kept those connections alive in their conversations. They set boundaries in their talks. Disagreements didn't mean disrespect, and that respect kept the dialogue going. Daryl also stayed patient. He didn't expect Roger to change overnight. He knew this was going to be years of conversations, not just one big debate. Crucial conversation strategies. A few things from crucial conversations stand out here. 1. Start with heart. Daryl's purpose was never to win an argument. It was to understand and to plant seeds for change. Start with heart, focused on purpose, not winning. 2. Make it safe. Even though they disagreed on almost everything, Daryl made sure Roger knew he could speak without being mocked or shouted down. That safety kept Roger coming back to the table. Mutual respect allowed honest talk. 3. State method. Share, tell, ask, talk tentatively, encourage testing. He watched for signs that Roger was feeling defensive or unsafe in the conversation, and he adjusted to keep things open. He wanted to share and tell, ask, and find out how he felt to create a safer, more understanding environment. And then explore others' paths. Learn from Kelly's perspective without endorsing it. Making it safe. Making it safe was a two-way street. Daryl didn't threaten Roger's physical safety or his right to speak, and Roger, in turn, showed up to talk instead of avoiding him. Daryl controlled his tone and stayed calm even when Roger said offensive things. That control made Roger more likely to actually listen. By not attacking Roger personally, Daryl separated the man from the ideology. That opened the door for Roger to start questioning the ideology without feeling like he was betraying himself. Theories that strengthened their bond. Fast versus slow thinking also plays a part here. Roger's thinking was fast. His snap judgments were based on years of conditioning and bias. Daryl got him to slow down and think more critically by asking questions and telling personal stories. From Otzel's ideas, we see perspective taking and action. Daryl tried to see the world through Roger's eyes, not to agree with him, but to understand how he got there. And from Fit Stuff, there's the importance of humanizing the other. Daryl broke the stereotype Roger had of black men simply by being himself in consistent, respectful interactions.
Hello, everybody. This is Betty. I will be doing my portion of our group presentation for Group 3. In my portion, I will be summarizing lessons learned between Daryl Davis and Roger Kelly. During my presentation, my portion of the presentation, I will be kind of discussing what they learned from each other, and what we could learn from them, and finally touching on how their story could potentially impact today's workplace. So, going into it, my first slide is strategies to identify common interests. So, those are separate, listen, build, and maintain. In this conflict between Daryl Davis and Roger Kelly, Davis was able to separate Kelly from essentially the problem, and that was his racist beliefs. He saw Kelly as an individual. He was able to listen to Kelly and ask questions, but he did it from a place of genuine curiosity. There was no hostility, there was no anger. He listened to understand. He didn't listen to argue or to win a fight that wasn't there between the two. In this approach, he was able to build a trusting relationship and trusting friendship with Kelly, because he was able to maintain respectful dialogue. And in maintaining that respectful dialogue, the relationship, the friendship was able to grow and thrive. And in doing so, it challenged Kelly's beliefs from his own perspective, not from anything that Davis said or made him feel. It was through open dialogue and respectful dialogue that Kelly questioned his own beliefs and challenged his own beliefs. Moving on to my next slide, crucial conversations and the key lessons learned from this situation. So in crucial conversations, it starts with heart. Davis engaged in this relationship with Roger Kelly to understand how he could hate him without even knowing him. He was curious and wanted to know the motives behind those beliefs. The next concept from Crucial Conversations was make it safe, to keep the dialogue respectful and to encourage openness as a result. I believe that Daryl Davis did an incredible job of making sure that Roger Kelly felt safe. He met him in his own environment, including his home, as well as rallies. He did so without attacking him or being aggressive. He was respectful and calm, stating my path by asking questions and listening to Kelly. It opened the lines of communication where he could also share his story, and state his facts and perspectives in a clear manner, in a way that Roger Kelly would hear him and come to conclusions on his own, challenging his perspectives, and then explore others' paths. So, despite the fact that Roger Kelly was a high standing member in this racist organization, he listened to all of his beliefs without challenging them, without telling him he was wrong, without attacking him for those feelings. He listened, he asked questions, he wanted to learn. And in return to that open, honest, safe communication, Roger Kelly was able to then ask his own questions, get his own perspective directly from a person of color, which eventually led to him changing his beliefs. Moving on to lessons learned from Daryl Davis and Roger Kelly. So this situation and this conflict was an impactful one. The lessons that the both of them taught were significant. They showed us that relationships divide across divides can reduce stereotypes. That a person of color and a person whose entire meaning and being is around hating people of color can be completely shifted just by having a calm and open and honest conversation. The fact that an individual could show so much respect for another individual despite the fact that they hated everything about them just for existing, shows that any kind of change can happen despite the situation if respect is given and people are open to change. They showed that sharing your story can build trust and understanding, as long as you're willing to listen and ask questions. Because change can't happen if you don't listen. If you go into it just to fight, just to attack, just to tell the other individual that they're wrong, you're not going to listen and you're not going to hear their perspective, and change can't happen. In this slide is included a quote from Daryl Davis that says, "Always keep the lines of communication open with your adversaries." And I believe in this situation, that's exactly what he did. Moving on to the impact on others, I apologize. So this impact reached many different people and communities, organizations. Through this open, honest, and respectful dialogue, people saw the power of change and how that despite such drastic differences in beliefs, the change could happen. It sparked a massive departure of KKK members, many whom gifted Daryl Davis with their gowns, their cloaks, when they departed, which was significant in itself. And some of them did that just based off of Roger Kelly's departure. That's what they were influenced by, but a lot of them were influenced based off just holding a conversation with Daryl Davis themselves. And this just set the example nationwide that change can happen if you're willing to listen and willing to question your beliefs, and you're willing to be respectful in doing so. The last slide, is the last area I'm gonna kind of discuss, was the potential impact on today's workplace. So while this situation and this conflict was more of a personal one, based on personal beliefs. I feel that the potential it could have on the workplace is significant as well. It showed that despite backgrounds, despite beliefs, despite social standing, as long as there's respect, open communication, and a willingness to listen, change can occur. With that, it would encourage inclusion. Um, it could turn conflict into opportunities for understanding, while strengthening team dynamics, and it could model integrity and leadership even during disagreements. So its message, and the techniques used have the potential to impact not only people on a personal level, but within the workplace. It was a really impactful story to read and to dive into. Um, and I really appreciated working on this project with my team. So thank you.